Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week we return to the Pentamerone for Sapia Liccardia, or Sapia the Glutton. Burton has the following faux Jacobean summary for it. Sapia, with her ability, maintaineth herself in all honour, in spite of the bad example of her sisters, their father being away. She laugheth at her lover, and foreseeing the danger which overshadoweth her, she surpasseth it, and at last the king's son taketh her to wife. Like most of these stories, it parks the moral up front. Basically, it's better to have good judgment than money, because one comes and goes, but the other one will be with you when you really need it. Long ago, there lived a merchant named Marcone, and he had 3 daughters, Bella, Canzoli, and Sapia the Glutton. He had to go to market, and knowing the eldest were great flirts, he nailed the windows shut. He gave each girl a ring with an enchanted gemstone that would change colour if they were unseemly. As soon as he leaves, the eldest daughters attempt to pry open the windows, and the youngest daughter has a crying fit about how this is a house, not an orange seller's cart. This is an odd thing to say, but it ties in surprisingly sharply with early Australian sex work and the razor gangs in Sydney, where one of the main players was an Italian grocer who worked a cart. But moving on. Opposite their house is a king's palace, and the king has 3 sons, and the boys make eyes at the girls, and then blow kisses of the hand, then talk, then make promises, and then scale the walls of the house. The 2 older girls and boys go off, but Sapia slides out of Prince Torre's grasp like an eel and locks herself in her room. He's forced to, quote, hold the mule while his brothers are filling sacks at the mill, end quote. He leaves discontented, and his passion grows over the days which follow, as do the bellies of the older sisters. They get sick of being chided by Sapia, so they conspire with Torre. The sisters claim they have the worst cravings for some of the king's bread, and Sapia agrees to go and collect it. So they lower her out of the window, and the one that the king's sons have smashed in. She's dressed as a beggar, and she goes to the king's palace to ask for some bread, but Torre, being in on the scheme, leaps out and grabs her. Fortunately, she has a sharp comb in the back of her hair. She flees, he's maimed for a few days. And then a few days later, the conspiracy tries again. The sisters send Sapia to steal 2 pears from the king's garden. Sapia meets the king's son in the garden, and she tricks him into climbing the tree for the pears, and then, after he throws them down, she pinches his ladder and runs off home, leaving him to be rescued by a gardener. He vows revenge. The sisters give birth to 2 beautiful boys, and fearing their father's imminent return, get Sapia to take the children to the palace. She puts a baby in the bed of each of the princes and a large stone in Torre's. The older princes think their kids are great, but Torre is angry because he doesn't get one. He throws himself dramatically on the bed to sulk, and knocks himself out on the stone. Marcone rolls back into town and checks the chastity rings, and he's a terrible person, so he grabs his sword to torture the girls. But they're saved by the arrival of a couple of princes with wedding proposals, and he decides that all's well that ends well, and agrees. He also throws in Sapia as part of the bargain, which she thinks is unwise. She makes a statue of herself out of sugar and pastry before the wedding, and then leaves the celebration early, claiming fatigue, and she slides the statue into her bed and hides. Her husband comes in and says, to quote from the Burton version, "Now shalt thou pay me, O ungrateful bitch, for all the anguish and heart-sore thou hast caused me. Now shalt thou perceive what it is for a cricket to compete with an elephant. Now shalt thou pay for all, and I will make thee remember the comb in the linen bag, the ladder from under the tree, and other tricks thou hast played me." And then he stabs the statue in the bed with a poniard. Not satisfied, he then says, "And I will even drink thy blood." And when he's sucking the sugary centre out of the statue, he's overcome by the metaphor and believes he should not have slain such a sweet damsel. He begins to lament and weep and generally carry on to the point where he decides to kill himself. So Sapia launches herself out of the closet, grabs his wrist and says, "I'm alive, I was only vexing you to check your constancy, pardon my misdeeds." And then they have make-up sex and live happily ever after. Remember, this guy's meant to be the hero and quite a catch. This sort of oversensitivity is meant to be a sign of nobility, Princess and the Pea style. In the version of this I read first, which is the title story from Beautiful Angiola, translated by Jack Zipes, they don't make it up by having it away, they eat the statue together. Now, that's even weirder, but I like it more because it seems like a mystery cult initiation. Your saga may vary.